Hey everybody! In today's tutorial, I'm going to do some no-line watercolor featuring the Japanese Wishing Garden bundle from the new Hero Arts catalog. This is what the stamp set looks like. That was Splotchy talking. I'm going to be using the Torii Gate and this beautiful bird from the set. Hi Splotchy! And I'm going to use my Magello Mission Gold watercolor for this. I have a piece of Fabriano watercolor paper set up in my Misty. And I'm using this soft vanilla ink cube from Hero Arts. As you know, I like to use yellow ink when I'm doing my no-line watercolor. And I just want to make sure that I get enough of the image here that I can use it as a guide. I don't know what it is about doing videos that makes the cats want to come participate, but I'm having a little bit of a cat swarm, so if you hear some background noise, it's my kitties. So now I have the bird and the gate stamped, and I'm ready to start painting. I had to look up what this image was. I had seen one in Hawaii, but I didn't know what they were called or what they meant. And they're called a Torii Gate, Torii. And they're usually at the entrance to a Shinto shrine, and they mark the transition from the profane to the sacred. The one that I saw in Hawaii was almost an enameled, very shiny red and black. And it was just spectacular in a spectacular garden in Hawaii. And so I wanted to paint mine in a similar way. So mine will be mostly red, but it's going to have this black top. And whenever I'm painting things like this, I do like to go look them up. And then I also look on Google Images just to see what the traditional coloring is, etc. I might not always use it, but it does give me a guide. So that is how I decided to paint this one. And what I wanted to do, I saw on Google Images that they were typically near ponds or other bodies of water. And so I wanted this to be at the edge of a pond that my little water bird was standing in. You can hear Maddie crunching on paper in the background, just to give you an idea of what I go through when I'm doing this. Splotchy is actually sitting on my back, and Maddie is stomping around making noise. They're so helpful. Now, on the bird, I kind of mixed my own Payne's gray here, because I wanted a blue-gray for this bird. I'm not sure. I did not look up what kind of bird this is, but it looked like some of our crane sort of birds that we have around here, and so I wanted a good blue-gray for the bird. And then I also want there to be some reflections in this image, and I'll show you how I got those a little bit later on. But I'm mixing some olives and some greens to put some shrubs and trees around the Torii Gate. The stamp set is called Japanese Wishing Garden, and so I knew I needed some garden elements in there, and I'm just painting these sort of out of my head, keeping them very loose and abstract. I won't have a lot of detail here. Now, when I stamped the bird, I meant to mask off his feet so that I could do a reflection, and I didn't do that. So I'm actually going to just make the water a little bit darker in the foreground of the image, which it would be naturally. That's how your eye would perceive it anyway. But I'm just doing it to cover up his feet, so not as an artistic statement. Now I'm using my piece of mirror image rubber here, and I want to transfer these images onto my painted piece using the mirror image rubber. And I'm doing that with the same ink. I'm just going to use that same soft vanilla ink and make sure I have a good impression there. And instead of using the transparency, I'm just using sort of my eye as a guide. I'm just kind of figuring out where everything's going to be. Not for any particular reason, just that I didn't feel like getting all that stuff out. So I'm going to mask off the top of the bird. And then I'm looking underneath just to see where I want this image to be in the water. And once I figure that out, I will just align with that ruler on the right-hand side to make sure my cardstock is straight up and down. And then just place that watercolor paper down and rub the ink in and see if I got a good enough guide to go with. It doesn't need to be a ton of ink. I just need to sort of generally see where the image was so that I can paint an accurate shadow. Sometimes you'll need to ink this several times to get enough ink on there to transfer. And especially since my image is already painted, it's a little bit more difficult to get that on there without a lot of ink. So I'm going to put it about where it was before. Just kind of judge where his little legs are, and then line it up with the side and rub it. And I should have plenty of image there to work with. So I will now use this as my guide for a little shadow. And I'm going to go back with that same custom mixed Payne's grayish color and just to outline this in the water. Since that's both the color of the bird and it's similar to the color of the water, I think it'll work great for a reflection and not really interfere with the main image too much. So once I have the outlines done, I can come back and sort of soften this out with water a little bit. And again, I'm not going for a super realistic reflection. I just want that shadow. And then I'll add some horizontal water lines because you would assume that the bird would be moving around a little bit and there would be ripples of water around his or her feet. And so the water isn't as smooth as it is in the rest of the image. I feel like I'm creating my own little world like Bob Ross taught us to do when I do things like this. I'm using my smallest silver brush here, and I will just add a few more details around the water before I move on. Sometimes I grab my bigger brush. This is a big honkin' brush to soften out edges where I've just recently laid down a little bit of color. And I want to make sure I'm eliminating any white space around the bird because when I do no line watercolor, I do leave that little gap. You saw me do that in the beginning. And that's because I don't want to put wet watercolor down next to wet watercolor and risk having those colors blend together or leach out. So even with this bigger brush, they hold their point so well. This is one of the things that I absolutely love about these silver brushes. They hold that tip so well that you can really do fine detail, which is what I like to do. I use my watercolor brushes more like a pen, I think, than most people do. I'm not good at that looser style. But they have such a great shape that I can get in close to that bird and get the effect that I want. So now I want to do the same thing for the Torii Gate. I want to create a reflection in the water. And I just have to figure out where to line this up on my rubber and then just make sure that I get enough ink on there to transfer. Same color. This is soft vanilla. And that looks pretty good, so I'll give that a try. Took me a second to figure out exactly how I needed to have that situated to make it look like a reflection. It's funny, when I did the mirror image blog hop, I actually had to go back and watch my first mirror image video to figure out what I was doing. So it's one of those things that you have to kind of think about just a little bit. So it looks like I don't really have enough here. So I need to ink that up. Again, not surprising on watercolor paper. And get myself just enough ink to give me an outline guide. I guess I could have done these at the same time, but I wanted to paint in between. So I can just peek under there and add the bottom of that gate to the water. And that worked perfectly. Now in this case, since there is a little bit more color in this image than there was in the bird, I am going to try to make that present in the water as well. And what I'm doing is really, really watering down the original colors that I used in the image so that they're very faint on top of the water, but so that they do retain the color of the object that's being reflected. So in this case, red. And you can see that it mixes with the blue and gets a little purpley on the water, just really just like it would in real life. This is such a simple shape. This one is not difficult to do in reverse in the water. So the important thing is just not to put too much color down because that wouldn't be realistic. So what I do is pick up water, add a little bit of pigment, and then just keep adding water several times until I get just a really, really pale pink to work with. And then the top part, of course, is black. So that one is just a watered down black. And this just adds, to me, I could have left the scene with just the gate and the bird, but I think it would be a lot flatter and less interesting if I didn't do the reflections. So there, I just took my absorber and just lightened up that black part of that shadow a little bit. And I think that looks better. So now I want to make sure this is completely dry because I will be adding shadows to the plants along the water line. And I want to make sure that I'm not activating the colors that I just put down for the gate and those shadows. I want those to retain that same shape. So here I'll just go in at the water line with a little bit of a lighter green and approximate those abstract shapes that I put in the background. And make sure when you do these shadows that they actually touch the object that they are reflecting. If you have a gap there, it's not going to look nearly as realistic. So you'll see me going all the way up to the shoreline and even a little bit over it to put these shadows down. Now the last thing I want to do is sort of extend the darker gray blue across the front of the image. It's a little bit fainter over here on the left, but that makes sense because most of the motion in the water would be near the bird anyway. So here's the finished project. I hope you've enjoyed this. Head over to my blog for a giveaway, a big giveaway, and also for a card drive that we were doing today for a great cause. Thanks so much for watching.